This is about my first 5 years at the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. I joined IIM Ahmedabad in the year 1973, to be precise, on December 3rd, 1973. And the way I happened to join IIM Ahmedabad itself is a very interesting episode. Dr. Uday Parikh and I were colleagues at the National Institute of Health Administration and Education, New Delhi, part of the Ministry of Health. And subsequently, we went to Udaipur to start the Department of Psychology. Dr. Parikh shifted to Ahmedabad, and both of us were on a joint project to write a book on the status study of population research in behavioral sciences, sponsored by the Family Planning Foundation of India, a Tata Foundation. We began the book in Udaipur, and Uday shifted to Ahmedabad, and I joined him in 1973, April-May, during the summer vacation, to be at Ahmedabad and complete the book. Those 2 months were wonderful months. Both of us used it to review literature, write chapters, and pass it on to one Mr. Kuppaswamy, who was Uday Parikh's secretary, and he would type hundreds of pages in a short period of time and make this particular book ready. That was the time when I was at IIM Ahmedabad. Dr. Uday Parikh prompted me to consider joining IIM Ahmedabad. He arranged interviews with the OB area faculty, and also I met Professor Ravi Mathai, who stepped aside as the director of IIM Ahmedabad, and Samuel Paul, who was the director at the time, and Vijayendra Tripathi, who was the dean. They interviewed me and they mentioned to me that Ravi Mathai is planning to work in education systems, and explored my interest in joining an education group. Being a person with education background, I have my B.Ed from the Regional College of Education, Mysore, and also have done a certificate in program instruction from NCERT, and of course Masters in Psychology, and just then completed my PhD, and my PhD happened to be in the field of medical education. So I certainly showed interest in the institute, and requested the institute to consider me. During this period at IIM Ahmedabad, they mentioned and inquired if I would be interested in working on a research project on evaluating entrepreneurship development programs in Gujarat. So I have readily said yes. Not only that I said yes, I have volunteered to come and initiate some work. So sometime in the month of September or October, I planned a trip to Kappadwanj, where an achievement motivation training program was going on. One Anil Trivedi, who was the project leader from Parishram, a entrepreneurship development center started by GIDC, GSFC, GISC, and GSIC, was conducting a achievement motivation program as a part of the entrepreneurship development efforts. I visited Kappadwanj, stayed there for about 3 to 4 days, observed the achievement motivation training to kind of evaluate it. As I was already teaching achievement motivation and was very familiar with David McClelland's models, and earlier I happened to be associated with SIET Institute, where David McClelland has worked, it was very easy for me to understand what's going on. Of course, the only problem was the program was half in Gujarati, and of course Hindi I didn't have much of a problem. So I prepared an interesting kind of a report, passed on to one Professor G.B. Shah, who was the coordinator of this particular project. I assume the institute discussed along with the entrepreneurship development team and so on. So sometime in the month of October or November, I got an offer to join IIM Ahmedabad as a faculty research associate. I didn't quite understand this term faculty research associate, but on inquiry I was told it is the same as an assistant professor. The only difference is that faculty research associates are supposed to spend more of their time in research and not necessarily in teaching. So in order to promote research, the institution preferred to call some of the assistant professors as faculty research associates. Otherwise, there is no difference at all. On knowing this, I've agreed to join and joined sometime on December 3rd, 1973. My joining was, of course, a very interesting experience. I found many things very unconventional, peculiar, and to my liking in the institute. I will mention a few of the things. One of the things that impressed me most at IIM Ahmedabad was the trust that they had on faculty. For example, in the first month itself, when I was to go to Delhi to read the proofs and then give my approval for the book on status study of population to be published by Tata McGraw-Hill, I planned my trip. I bought my tickets to Delhi, and then went and asked a colleague of mine in wing number 12, OB area, how do I apply for leave as I go out to read the proofs in Delhi of a book that is coming out. And there must be some form, because normally both in the ministry or in the university, whenever you go out of town, you are supposed to apply for leave of absence on duty. So the what the professor said shocked me. He said that TV, you don't have to apply for any leave if you are not taking any advance money from the institute, or if the institute is not booking your ticket. All that you need to do is to inform your secretary, and since you are going on an official duty and for a work which you are supposed to be doing in any way, that is good enough. I jocularly said, you mean in this institute professors have to take permission of their own secretaries rather than the director? They said, yes, that is what it is. This institute runs on self-regulation. It trusts faculty, and we don't believe in wasting our time supervising each other. So that was a very interesting thing. I didn't have to inform the area chairman, nor the education systems coordinator, nor the director. Just have to go and perform my duties. And what a wonderful kind of a culture the institute has. I'm told that it still continues at the institute. It's based on trust and self-regulation. The only time when you need to take permission when you travel out is when you need some advances for accounting purposes. The accounts department will have to put it in some account or other, and that certainly needs the approval of the director. And the other interesting thing was all faculty reported to the director. At that time we were almost about 50 to 60 faculty. It went up to 80 to 90 in subsequent years, but all faculty reported. So it was said to be a flat structure. The institute has assistant professors and professors. That's it. There are just two categories. Faculty associates were treated as assistant professors, and I was told that 3 years after one joins the institute, one is reviewed for one's research contributions, teaching contributions, publications, and if you handle any administration. And on the basis of the inputs that the institute receives, of course, teaching is evaluated every term by the students, and it is publicly posted. And research is evaluated by sending the research projects, if any, to outside people. And publications, of course, speak for themselves. And the entire activities are planned, put in black and white, because every year in the month of January, February, a faculty member is expected to plan his or her own work and pass it on to the dean, and the dean ensures that all important programs are manned and so on. So that was the interesting kind of a culture I came to know in the first few weeks itself at IIM Ahmedabad. Another thing that impressed me was everyone was addressed by first name. We used to call Samuel Paul as Paul, who was the director of the institute. Subsequently, when Vyas became director, even before he became director, we would call him Vijay. Ravi Mathai was addressed as Ravi, and I was, of course, embarrassed to call Dr. Uday Parikh for quite some time as Uday, because for most of us who worked very closely with him, it is either Dr. Professor Parikh or Sir. I mean, that is the way we used to. But I think I had to shed all this and then be on the first name. And when you are on first name with all faculty and with all seniors, everyone, you start feeling very, very much uplifted, empowered, and equal to everyone. I think that makes a hell of a lot of difference in terms of the culture of an institute. So the first name culture, designations didn't matter at all. Everyone had the same size room. Everyone shared a secretary with another professor, except when you are an activity head, you get a full-time secretary, and everyone is supposed to do uh, 6 unit equivalents of work, that is equivalent to teaching 30 sessions for a PGP class of about 50 to 60 students, and includes, I think, designing, evaluation, course material, supply, and everything of that kind. So that is the kind of a peer culture that we had. And while at the time of appointment, one's designation is announced, so and so is appointed as assistant professor or professor or faculty research associate. After that, nobody really bothered. In fact, I think in those days, quite often I found it uh, difficult to believe some hefty walking individual with a large number of students following him, looking like a professor, is an assistant professor. And sometimes a slim and short looking person, looking like a young boy with nobody following him, is already a professor. That means you cannot judge anyone in IIM Ahmedabad, whether he is a professor or assistant professor, on the basis of either physical appearance, popularity with students, or any other kind of symbols. I think all are addressed as professors. And that is the peer kind of a culture this particular institute promoted. I think these were some of the very interesting things. And in the first year itself, I designed a course on entrepreneurship, laboratory and entrepreneurial motivation, because I was completing this study on evaluating entrepreneurship. So I prepared quite a few case studies, and the case studies were registered, since this was a very interesting project evaluating the entrepreneurial development programs in Gujarat. So I prepared case studies, registered case studies, and floated a course, and I designed the entire course on my own. Of course, my colleague Uday Parikh also joined in offering this particular kind of a course. So these were some very, very interesting things I observed in my initial years of work at the IIM Ahmedabad. I will tell in the next video more about my subsequent experiences at IIM.